Spoilers for both Lobotomy Corporation and Library of Ruina ahead. Keep that in mind before you continue watching. All I think about is how I'll kill that bastard in a way more gruesome and painful than the last time. Thus, there's no toast to raise. There's no deliciously baked cakes to eat, or wine to drink. I got used to grinding the axe instead of picking flowers when I was 15. The Little Red Riding Hood, a fairy tale originating from around the 17th century, it's an European folktale which is fairly notable, as I'm sure most of you know. As nostalgic as it is, this is pretty hard to talk about. What I just said is something hotly debated to begin with. That version of Little Red Riding Hood is written by Charles Perrault, who is usually seen as the one to come up with the original story. However, this might not be correct. Some sources point to older and more ancient origins, which I will not be talking about. This is because, in my opinion, it's pretty clear that Project Moon's interpretations of the Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf derive from the more recent sources of the fairy tale. The name comes from Charles Perrault's version of the tale, but with story elements from the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So that's what I'll be covering today. The tale starts with an explanation of the girl's nickname. Her grandmother had a Little Red Riding Hood made for her which fit her well. Okay, can I shorten that? Let's just stick with Little Red. This is when things seem to point towards the Brothers Grimm version of the tale. In Perrault's variant, Little Red was asked to bring a cake and pot of butter up to her grandma. However, the Brothers Grimm wrote that Little Red was asked to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine, which can be linked to the Little Red Riding Hooded Mercenary's encyclopedia page. This leads me to believe that Project Moon mainly emphasized this version of the tale for their interpretation. Of course, I'm sure most of us remember the rest of the story. A wolf approaches our titular character and she casually tells him everything he needs to know about her grandmother's house and how to find it. The wolf then suggests that she goes to pick some flowers, which she does. The wolf then proceeds to devour her grandmother whole, before disguising himself as her and doing the same to Little Red when she comes by the house a bit later. This is when things get a little shaky. In Perrault's version, this is when the story ends with the wolf coming out victorious. This obviously isn't how it goes for us. The Brothers Grimm write that a huntsman who passed by found the wolf and cut his belly with a pair of scissors so that Little Red and the grandma popped out. Funny enough, this isn't the only tale by them to have a wolf's belly snipped open. The Wolf and the Seven Young Goats is another tale that has victims in the belly of a wolf who are rescued by cutting the belly open. But yeah, in other variations of the story, a woodsman or a hunter comes to the rescue with an axe instead of a pair of scissors. This is implied to be the actual method used against the wolf, as the belly is referenced to be slashed open by an ego gift, and also by the fact that the mercenary uses an axe. In the Grimm's tales, the wolf is drowned by some very confusing circumstances that I'll get into later, but that clearly isn't the case here. Obviously, at some point, our Red Hood diverged from the original fairy tale, and there's multiple points in which she could have. Maybe she noticed that her grandma was a wolf, maybe she sliced open the wolf's belly from the inside, so on and so forth. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is that in the end, the fight went on for a very, very long time. It's clear that Little Red holds some kind of trauma when it comes to the wolf. It's not exactly stated why, though inferences can be made. Notably, under her mask is a deeply scarred face that seems to almost be skinned. She's even lost an eye and a note is written. There was only a single cursory wound in the beginning, but the scars deepened. Interesting. She's shown to be discomforted by the idea of seeing herself or having parts of her body exposed, likely because of these scars. It's an insecurity for her. Every time she gets a new one, it's a disgrace. But they're still very important to her and reaffirm her reasons for fighting. Her fight to persevere. But other than that, we don't really know much. In fact, quite a lot about her is just vague information. We know that she used to be a mercenary and enjoys the thrill of battle. She's a bit of a blood knight, and we also know that she slaughtered quite a few animals herself. She's professional and honestly fairly trustworthy when it comes to anything other than the wolf. Her ego's description gives us a bit of information. She values striking in what is described as blind hatred, over holding on to an insecure courage. This characterizes her a lot more than one thinks. Her encyclopedia page reads, upon encountering the big and will-be bad wolf, she undergoes several psychological transitions including sudden depersonalization and intermittent explosive disorder. It's like she can't help it. She's truly blinded by her anger even though deep down she knows that this might not end well. She's also described as paranoid and desperate to resolve emergency situations. If too many abnormalities breach, her Clive of Counter will eventually hit 0. Particularly, she gets hell-bent on hunting the first thing she sees. It's like her instincts take over and all that's on her mind is the thrill of the hunt. But that's really about all we get when it comes to Little Red. One thing to note is that I find her a really likable character, which is odd. She's a really fun character and the idea and execution of her abilities are very well done. But what makes her so charming? I don't know. But that's just an observation. Let's move on. If we knew little about Little Red, we know less about the wolf. But he does have one overarching theme. Expectations. When you first encounter it, it's a cutesy and adorable version of the big bad wolf. He also has a few references to the Little Red Cap and 2 other fairy tales. First of all, he pulls the line out of the wolf and the 7 young goats, and he also talks about the 3 little pigs. What I find interesting about the wolf is that he apparently suffers from chronic indigestion, which explains why he takes a while to devour your employees. In the original tales by the Brothers Grimm, after the wolf's belly is snipped open, the characters fill it with rocks, causing it to drown. Whether or not this indigestion is caused by the rock situation or just having his gut spilled out, that's up to you. I like the rocks explanation cause it's funnier. But still, something interesting I thought I would note. Last of all, I wanted to talk about the theme for the wolf. According to the University of Pittsburgh, Charles Perrault's intended moral was that children should not talk to strangers, who here are characterized as the wolf. Even if they are charming, quiet, polite, and sweet, those are cunning and, in fact, the most dangerous of all. All wolves are the same, after all. This is heavily emphasized in almost all ways by Project Moon. The name, the wolf's story, and last of all, his role. It was wrong of him to be born a wolf. It didn't matter who he was or what he did. Regardless, he was the big bad wolf. That was all he was. Even if he wanted to be different, everyone would still see him the way they did before. So what was the point in trying to be good? Of course, this doesn't absolve him of all guilt. The fact of the matter is, he's accepted that he's a wolf. He tries to keep himself in check, but willingly lets go, a polar opposite as to how the Little Red completely loses control. It's fairly interesting. The wolf is something that we can all sympathize with, but he's still overall a villainous entity. The wolf was mistreated solely because it was a wolf. But does that justify it accepting its position as the big bad wolf? I would say yes. Imagine if from young, everyone told you that you were cursed, that you'd grow up to be a bad person and that you'd never do any good in your life. Would you have fallen into what they said? Personally, I think I would. But that's completely subjective and depends on who you are as a person. That's what makes this tale so interesting, cause everyone will have different takes on it. Project Moon never truly drops the unreliable narrative. Will you justify his actions in your mind, or reprimand him and have him take responsibility for the decisions that he made? As usual in these games, that's up for you to decide. And that's it for this video. I did plan on covering the aberrations, but it was hard to do so with the limited information that we have. So I'll leave that for another time. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit again, yeah? See you around.